I have participated in Duke rolling, or like you and yours. And one of the things that I watching the good bits of it is watching recipes being made, and you can watch people making things online. Yeah, well, let me tell you, notice how easy they make it. Have you noticed that there's a recipe? Now I didn't try this. I've done some of the breads. Breads are a little easier. But I have friends who wanted to make this watermelon sorbet with 2 ingredients. Okay? Now the video it shows, this nice Adonis looking man who is cutting watermelon, just perfectly square, puts it on a plate, puts it in a freezer, allows later apparently now puts watermelon into the blender. He blends it all up, squeezes some lime juice into it, and there you have it. Put it into a cup and you have a nice watermelon sorbet. Now, when my friend told me this, do you think it was that easy? How many of you put in your freezer to put a tray of watermelon? Not even when I go to the grocery store do I have room in my freezer. So you end up putting it in a bag, which is what she did, and then you stuff it somewhere it will fit in the freezer, which means when you pull it out, it is a mess, a blob of frozen watermelon. Then what fits in your Ninja blender? Because it has multiple blades in it. So you end up having to chip away at this frozen watermelon, which obviously made a mess when you cut the original watermelon, because at least when I cut watermelon, I get juice and seeds, if I can still find seeded watermelon, because I still think they taste better. That goes on the counter on the floor. I use a cutting board with a little drip thing in it, juice everywhere. But she was there chipping away at this pile of watermelon to make it fit in her blender, and then she put flying everywhere. Another mess. And then finally, she gets it all in there, and you can't blend it all at once because of the size, so she's doing it in bits and pieces. There is mess everywhere. But she finally succeeds in blending, she puts in however they want to blend it. She gets it all into, she only takes one cup at this point, and she tries it, and yes, it is delicious. But the other parts were all edited out by the influencer, because when he was making this concoction, it was no mess on his counter. It was just nice, unjuicy watermelon that he was cutting up on a clean, dry cutting board, and you just know that they edited out all of the hard parts, or had a completely other freezer to allow it to be human be used for, making the things that he makes. And so while it's easy, it really wasn't. And most of us know, oh yes, they edit things, and yet at the same time, we want to try them because it does look easy when they do it. It is messy. It is not black and white, not necessarily gray either. Life is to be, I think, lived in full color. Lived in full color. It is not an easy black and white. Follow the steps that everything works out perfectly. Like raising a kid. I think that's why they don't give you an instruction manual, because I'm twins, and I'll tell you right now, I can do the same thing for both, and it will work for one and not for the other. That's why I tell people why I'm so good at eating, is because it's to work for one of the two. So I don't have a complete failure, because at least it's working for one of them. And so, yes. So maybe sometimes you have a 66% success rate or 66% failure rate. It works for at least one of the three. So yeah, two. But I can say it's worth at least one that I felt pretty good. But life in full color is not the edited simplicity that videos make things to be. Even the sitcoms many of us watched on TV when we were kids were edited out. And I bring that up because there's a lot going on in our passages today. And they all sort of tie together. I'm going to start first with Joseph because the Bible passage leaves a lot of detail out that would be helpful for a majority of human beings on this planet. You have Joseph, he puts his brothers to the test. They come back, and you just hear that he sends people out, and then he reveals himself, and they have this crying, pleasant reunion. How many of you think it went that smoothly? Because I don't. I can picture Joseph, and he went to time, they took the brothers to go back to their father, and come back again with the brothers, and X, Y, and Z. I imagine him should have been amazing with his wife and his kids and who he would talk to about what to do about the brothers that threw him in a pit and then sent him and put him as a slave in Egypt. Yes, he was stepping in command at this point, but it went through a pretty rough time. I think he would recognize those feelings of wanting to trust him. Getting back at them, saying some pretty mean things, putting them in their place, a whole bunch of things. I just wish some of that would have been in the Bible because the Bible story makes it look a little too easy. It makes it look like that by the time they came back, they saw that they had changed and oh yeah, your brother, it was all God's plan. I think he came. Humans aren't like that. We need time to process and feel the different emotions we have because life is lived in full color. It is not always a straight path to where we want to go or where we expect we will be. So then we move now to our gospel because Jesus, as we know, is gifted at understanding the minds and motives of his fellow human beings. And yes, I know him being God is part of that. But still, what we don't have in this passage, if you look at commentaries, the passage begins at verse 10 today. But 10 and 11 are a part of the starting to determine what you want to know. You cannot include it. But a lot of commentaries will put 10, 11, 12 together as one set, and then start with the rest of what we heard today. And I kept going back to verses 10, 11, and 12, where Jesus is talking about what comes, what goes into the mouth and what defiles what comes out of the mouth. And so I've been trying to piece that together because, there's a lot we could say. And I'm saying it so I'm still all tangents. But if we go to what was happening with Jesus today, when he's doing what he does really well, putting the Pharisees in their place. You see, the Jesus and his disciples had not food before they ate the bread. And, breaking, one of the ritual cleanliness laws and commandments. And Jesus, on one hand, God and his give them credit for defense with all of their heavy duties that the Pharisees do, over and over again. And so he talks to them, and he goes this whole thing about what comes into the mouth, and what you say out of the mouth, and what it leads to. And so I want to say a little bit about what's going on there, because the Pharisees, they're widely respected in their day because they appear on the outside to follow the Mosaic law beautifully well. And the Pharisees have, over the centuries, put into place what Jesus calls human rituals, human traditions. He called it your traditions. So in other words, that's not a law that they're required to follow, but they're human traditions that they put in place to help us follow God's law. That's what Jesus is referring to. And he basically is pointing out how they're being hypocrite. Because what's going on is one of the traditions in the Pharisaical law is that if a son decides he wants to give a large gift or donation to the temple, and it gets in the way of him taking care and honoring his mother and father, well, that's okay. Because you're honoring God by giving all of this money, donation, gift to the temple. And Jesus is pointing out to them that that's actually encouraging people to break the Ten Commandments, because you're supposed to honor your father and your mother. You're not required to pay a census tax according to God. That's a human convention. And it might be from, might be from a part what the temple needs to function, but what Jesus is pointing out to them is that you're making it too easy. It isn't black and white. A person has to honor take care of them, as well as being able to give a gift to the temple. Because a gift implies it isn't required. It was being given freely. And so I guess if a person is angry and has a lot of good parents and you don't want to honor the father and take care of them in their life, you can just give all up to the temple and go, give it all to the temple if it's not actually bothering, because that's what was being allowed. And so Jesus is pointing out this hypocrisy, this line of trying in their dedication to try and have this list. You know, if you follow and check all of these things off, you'll be righteous with God. That can actually get in the way of living the way God wants us to live. And, you know, we learn the Ten Commandments, even as Christians. The Ten Commandments were supposed to create an equal playing field for all people. Tammy, can I ask you a question? In your class, do you have class roles, you know, that the students do? And you're supposed to rotate through them, right? Why? What does that help in your class? Is it unfair to do that, or is it fair? It is, it's fair. It gives everybody a chance. And it's like that. They apply to everybody. Didn't matter the status, didn't matter the position, tribes. Everybody had followed the same rule, which was contradictory to the nations outside of Israel. And yet the Pharisees were managing to find ways where they were thinking their ritual and traditions were more important than following them. So now we'll jump back to, you know, life isn't black and white, there are some gray areas, because as individuals, as people, even in a community or a group, what God has wanted, what Jesus is making a point to emphasize every step of the way, is that people come first. First four commandments and the first three commandments are for our relationship with God. All the others are about how we are to relate to each other. And so Jesus makes it even easier for us. He doesn't give us 8, he doesn't give us 10, he gives us 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. And then the other one, love your neighbor and your neighbor like yourself, which kind of brings the law. It presupposes that we all be treated well, and all be treated with respect. So if we want it, we have to give it. And so we have in gospel today Jesus pointing out that it isn't as easy as just following human rules. You can't make it a black and white thing. I don't know how many of you, but I know a lot of you have read a book by Lex Lyle, The Giver. Everybody heard of The Giver? Six Sunlights. So in The Giver, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. This movie is very well done. But basically, in this, this dystopian world, one of the things that was noticed quality in the part that we hear in this book is everything is done on a particular timeline. The kids wear clothes with a certain number of buttons based on their age. Every family, men and women are paired together to be married, and kids are given to them to raise a boy and a girl and young others. They don't have kids. Kids are given to them to raise that they have to apply for. And at age 11, I think it is, they get their 9, they get their bikes, around until then everybody walks. There are new cars. There's a certain amount of food that everybody, everything is predetermined and in a straight line. There's no room for variables in the story. And indeed, when identical twins are born, to prevent there being confusion, to allow the survivors to want to weighs more or scores higher on the outcome test of the age. They don't allow for any of the variables. And we all know, and it's something that I was supposed to go into what some people are is that life isn't black and white. As we hear in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. There are always variables outside of our control, and Jesus is continually trying to teach us and pound into our heads is that it is about our relationship with each other. It is about how we treat each other, how we take care of each other, how we love each other, how we make sure other individuals have what they need, not just to live, but to thrive, to grow, to become all that God has created them to be. And so today, as we hear our passage, I don't have just one verse to give to you because the whole passage, and indeed even the Genesis story with Joseph, I think reminds us of how life is messy. When we live it in full color, when we stop trying to allot for and control every element, as Jesus constantly is trying to reteach the Pharisees in there, we learn that there is so much joy to be experienced in healing a child, in forgiving somebody their sin, and including somebody back in the community as Jesus spends his time ministering and traveling back and forth through the countries. And the same is true for us. Our joy is to come being in relationship. Being in relationship with God, yes. But a large part of that relationship with God comes from us living in relationship with each other. We need both. To be able to live life in full color. And know that when life is not easy, when it is not black and white, when there are too many shades of gray, we can come here in relationship with St. Patrick's, and we can be carried along the way, or we can be walked with where we are. We can be loved who we are, as long as we need it, because you will do the same when somebody else here needs it. Try to live life in full color. It is not supposed to be as easy as black and white checklist that we checklist. And know that when life gets messy, you can come here, be with your friends, be with your family. Know that we will love you, we will walk with you, we will carry you always.
Amen.